Proverbs chapter 18. This is the second part of Principles from Proverbs 18. And we'll begin at verse 13 tonight. Just going verse by verse down through this chapter. And Principles from Proverbs is significant because there's so many practical helps in life that Proverbs gives us. And so there are times that we stop and we focus on one or two verses for one whole message. We did that with Proverbs 18 verses 1 and 2 a couple of weeks ago. Last week we covered the first half of the chapter, and now we're going on to the second half of the chapter. Principles from Proverbs 18 and verse 13 is where we'll begin. It says, "He that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him." Now, we could stop with this verse tonight. I could have a 7-minute message or a 5-minute message, and we could just read that verse. I could just explain that verse, and I think we could walk out the door and all be better for it. Why is that? Because has anyone here ever opened your mouth, rushed to judgment, and spoke presumptuously, and you didn't know all the facts? Anybody here like that? Yeah, I'd say all of us can say, I think all of us can say yes, all right? Even if you didn't raise your hand, I'm going to count you down in the yes column as well. Because I don't know that there's anybody, I mean, if you have been able to go through all of life and never say something without knowing all the facts, that you answer a matter without knowing the facts, I would love to get a little taste of that, because that is just something that, you know, if we want to have the answers, but sometimes we give the answers without knowing all the facts first, and those answers can do great harm or be out of place if we don't have all the facts. But it says, "He that answereth the matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him." And I've said this before, I've regretted more times that I've opened my mouth and said something than I've closed my mouth and listened. I regret opening my mouth more than I regret closing my mouth. Now, there are times we need to open our mouth, and there's a time to witness to somebody. You open your mouth and you witness to them. But when it comes to, say, a conversation and just talking with someone, it's because it brings shame. I mean, I feel shameful. I feel embarrassed, or I feel bad because, boy, I really wish I wouldn't have said that. I didn't, especially in this case when you don't know all the facts. It is so important to know the facts. There's a lot of things that go on in the news today, stuff that gets reported in the news, and a lot of things get reported without, you don't necessarily know all the facts behind what's being reported. And by the way, that could be in liberal news media, or that could even be so-called conservative media. There could be things reported that only give part of the facts, and so then jump to conclusions, rush to judgment, and it's just unwise. It's foolishness, it's a folly, and it says it's folly and shame unto him. So when getting ready to answer a matter, make sure you hear it out. Hear out the facts. Hear out the way things really are, instead of jumping to conclusion. Or, you know, the other caution is you might think you have all the facts, but you really don't. So it's a matter of being important to be sure you have all the facts. There might be there might be a second side to the story. There might be someone else who's got a different perspective. I mean, let's just say if I were to counsel a husband and wife, and maybe they've got children in the home, or maybe they don't have children in the home. You know, there are times, and I've heard of this, not necessarily as much for myself exclusively, but in other cases where other pastors, other people have done counseling. You talk to a husband of how what do you think things are like in your home? What do you think your relationship with your wife is like? Oh, it's fine. Things are, and then you might talk to the wife separately, and she might have a whole different story. Oh my goodness, he's this, and this, and things are going on like this. And you could get two different assessments of what's going on in a home by talking to the husband and wife. Or it could be reversed. The husband would say, "Oh my goodness, my wife's like this," and the husband or the wife saying, "Oh, things are fine. I'm just going along just fine." And so there could be two sides to a story. Now, for parenting, it's important not to rush to judgment. I opened up the refrigerator door last evening, and I looked and there was a piece missing. What happened to the shelf rack thing, the thing that holds the stuff on the shelf in the door. And I found out it got broken. And so I asked a direct question. I'm not going to incriminate anybody tonight as to exactly what happened. But my wife didn't have all the facts. She wasn't really clear. And so I just asked the direct question, how did this happen? And I got the story. And it would have been easy for me. And I listened to the whole story. And it was very brief. It didn't take much. But it didn't take long to figure out it wasn't just one person. It was two people. So rushing to judgment would have been blaming just that first person that I knew had involvement, but then not getting the facts to then realizing, no, there were two involved. And so in that case, I don't believe I spoke presumptuously. I answered the matter and said, all right, here's what's going to have to happen, and equally for both parties involved. But that's so important. Why? Because, well, in the case of parents and children, you can actually provoke children to wrath if you are being presumptuous and not dealing fairly, but to be able to deal fairly, you have to hear the facts. As a pastor in a church, to be able to deal with people fairly and justly, you need to have the facts to be able to deal with things properly. In all parts of life, and in an individual conversation, you can be the best blessing to someone if you actually get the facts. If you counsel somebody, if someone's confiding in you, some personal things, maybe it's some things they're going through in life, they might not give you all the facts right up front. It might take a while till you get all the facts. So be careful about how you answer people, and when you answer people, that he that answereth the matter before he heareth it is folly and shame unto him. Verse 14, the spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear? A lot of people have infirmities. They have things that happen to their physical bodies. They suffer in certain ways. They might have some health issue. Just have some infirmity in their life. But it says, the spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear? In other words, it's possible to handle infirmities, but how you handle those infirmities depends on your inward spirit. Depends on your attitude. If someone's got a wounded spirit and they've got an infirmity, it's hard for them to bear that infirmity. That's when people might just get depressed and their lives go in a troubling direction, in the wrong direction, and they just can't seem to move forward in life. They have these problems. But it says the spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity. So if someone has the spirit where they are able to just have I would say, being strong in spirit, then even when someone's dealing with an infirmity, then that can be dealt with. Now, I would say David's spirit sustained his infirmity. Now, when not David, the psalmist in Psalm 73, Asaph, and this is when he was doubting the goodness of the Lord and God taking care of him. He was really struggling, and he's asking these questions. But then he said, when I thought to know this. No, I'm sorry. Psalm. I'm in the wrong psalm. I didn't write that down in my notes, so I shouldn't have said anything. But anyway, there's the psalm that has slipped my mind, where the psalmist says, "This is mine infirmity. This is mine infirmity," and so It completely slipped my mind. Like I said, I didn't have it written down. But anyway, it was not Psalm 73. I'm pausing. I'm waiting. Someone know that psalm? Someone know this? Say a number. Say a number. Go ahead. Somebody. Nobody knows it. All right. Now I'm determined to find it. No, it's Psalm 70. 7. Psalm 77. All right, got it. It was not 73, it was 77. I'm sweating up here. Maybe it's because it's warm, but no, it's my brain's working too hard. I'm sweating. Psalm 77, when the Psalm of Asaph, he says, he's asking these questions in verse 7. Will the Lord cast off forever? Will he be favorable no more? Is his mercy clean gone forever? Doth his promise fail forevermore? Hath God forgotten to be gracious? Hath he in anger shut up his tender mercies? Selah. And I said, this is my infirmity. He had some sort of sore. He had a day of trouble. And he's seeking the Lord. And he's kind of getting discouraged. He can't sleep. He's troubled. He's overwhelmed. It says, my spirit was overwhelmed. But notice how his infirmity did not change. His spirit changed. He no longer was thinking about blaming God for his infirmity or doubting God or questioning God. His spirit changed, and he says, this is my infirmity. This is what I have to deal with. It's just a reality of life. It's a fact of life. He says, but I will remember the years of the right hand of the Most High. So his thinking shifts, his spirit changes, and it's the same infirmity. He's got the same infirmity. But the way he responds to it is different. And that's what we're getting at in Proverbs 18 and verse 14. The spirit of a person. Why is it that some people with the same infirmity, two people with the same infirmity, can be of completely different spirit, completely different attitude? Well, it's what's in their heart, what their inward attitude is. And so a person's infirmity does not have to dictate what your spirit is going to be like. Verse 15, the heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. Now this kind of connects with verse 13, is that prudent and wise people make good decisions because they gather the facts. So whether you're answering someone or whether you're making good decisions, you need to gather the facts. I try to gather the facts before I make decisions, and especially the more major the decision is, the larger the decision, the more consequential, it's important to gather the facts. The heart of the prudent. Now, prudent is cautiously, wisely putting things into practice. The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. In other words, if you're wise, you'll know you need more knowledge. If you're going to be able to put things into practice, you need more knowledge to make good decisions. In verse 16, it says, a man's gift maketh room for him, and bringeth him before great men. Now, this could be speaking of honest gifts, and it could also be speaking of bribes. Either one can serve to gain the favor of others. I don't think anybody gives any money away at church planting conferences to gain the favor of others, but I tell you, you have a different viewpoint of someone when they are the one that has actually given you money. They've participated in the offering for you. Now that person I mentioned earlier who made that humorous remark, I gave him some money. I made sure that I had some money to take along, and I wanted to give something regardless of what was in our church bank account, our church missions fund. I wanted to make sure we had some money to take along. And so gave some money to this particular church planner. And then sitting at, and I don't know if this was necessarily in response to me giving to them. This may have had nothing to do with it. The wife, I think it was at breakfast the next day, I sat near them. Actually, no, I first walked in, and the wife said I was going to walk up and get some food, and the wife came over and she says, we have something to give you, don't leave. And I said, okay, all right. So it just so happened I went over and sat near them anyway, and she pulls out a $50 prepaid Visa gift card and hands it to me. And I guess she wanted to give it to me. Now, if I understood her correctly, I think it was meant for my wife based on a comment she made, but I wasn't hearing her too well, so I'm not sure if it's for my wife. It might just be for me to use. No, I think it's for my wife. But anyway, what would your opinion be if a person when someone just walked up to you and gave you a $50 prepaid Visa gift card? You'd have a good opinion of them. So even if it's an honest gift, it's not a bribe. It's an honest gift. It's just a heartfelt gift, a kind, generous gift. And So gifts serve to gain the favor of others. Now, motivation for giving a gift should never be to gain the favor of someone else.
That's right.
But it says, a man's gift maketh room for him and bringeth him before great men. Think about in politics. Who gets the most access to people in government? The big money people who give them the money, the big amount of money. And they have the best access. And that's not always a bad thing. It's not always a good thing. It just is what it is. It's just a fact of life. And that's why some of these proverbs are just, a lot of the proverbs are just, here's the way life is. And if you just understand, if you read the Proverbs and believe it, you understand, okay, this is the way life is, and it can help us in our navigation through life. So we should, gifts are a wonderful thing, but it should never be with that intention. It should never be with the intention of gaining someone else's favor, even though that can be a byproduct of that. In verse 17, he that is first in his own cause seemeth just, but his neighbor cometh and searcheth him. Now we get a little lesson about human nature, because it seems as if human nature is, they're the ones in the right, someone else is in the wrong. Here's what happened. I'm vindicated. I'm right. Blame someone else. But then the neighbor comes along, the other person who knows a little more of the story, and you find out more of the story when you find out someone who knows them or their situation. And so hearing both sides of the story is important. He that is first in his own cause seemeth just. So you get the first story and you think, well, that's pretty believable. Wow, you've really been wronged. I mean, you're just. You're in the right here. But then you just gather a few more facts, talk to a few more people, get a little more of the rounded viewpoint of a situation, and you find out, oh, it's not exactly the way, not completely all that they are making it out to be. And another fact of life. It's another fact of life. We need to, once again, hearing both sides of the story, gathering the facts, and not being overtaken by just one person's good-sounding story. Now, for believers, we ought to be trustworthy. We ought to be, if we're telling someone something else, we should not have a one-sided, slanted story. Not lead people to believe something that isn't completely true. But what you find in a lot of people in society, that is the way it is. A lot of people have their own story, but it's only part of the story. And of course, they're the just one. They're the one who's been wronged. They're the ones who have room to blame everybody else. And they won't deal with their own issues, particularly if it's a lost person. And they might have gone through some legitimate wrongs in their life, but then you hear some other things about them and you think, oh, I didn't hear this from that person. I get more of the story. And it's hard even when a person is first in their own cause and they want to come across as just. It's hard for a lost person even then to get to the point of giving them the gospel to show them their need for salvation, because they're too fixated on vindicating themselves and giving their side of the story. But that needs to be, especially in the case of a lost person, still gearing things back to the gospel and their need for a Savior. But hearing both sides of the story is important. Verse 18 says, the lot causeth contentions to cease and parteth between the mighty. Now, it wasn't that long ago I talked about lots a little bit, but lots were used in a good way when matters couldn't be resolved otherwise. That was just something that was done in culture in certain ways, and it'd be kind of like today if we were to draw straws or just draw a number out of a bowl, something that's if you can't resolve a matter, or I found in the case of my workplace, if we're not able to come to an agreement on who's going to go to lunch when, they have a bowl with some numbers in it, and whoever draws a certain number, well, you get the later lunch or you get the earlier lunch. And it's not that there's disagreements on it. It just might be if two people say, I don't care when I go to lunch. Okay, well, let's draw numbers. And it's a good way to resolve things that can be agreeable to everyone. And that's what they used lots for. Now, and let me just re-emphasize from what I emphasized the last time I talked about lots. This is not justification for playing the lottery. It's not the same, not the same as playing the lottery. You can use lots as far as decisions and things like that if it's appropriate to do so, but that's not the same as playing the lottery. In verse 19, a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle. Anybody ever deal with an offended, particularly a family member? It says a brother offended. Anyone deal with an offended family member and it's really hard to win them back? Certainly. It can be, and family members, once they're offended and there's a rift in a relationship, it can be really hard. It can be harder for family members than even for two people who aren't related to have a restored relationship. And that is the importance of being careful of not to cause offense that we can avoid. Now, sometimes people get offended at things that they shouldn't get offended about, and you can't always control that. But at the same time, we ourselves need to have enough awareness to be careful of not to bring offense into other people's lives, because it's a whole lot easier to maintain a relationship that hasn't experienced offense than it is to repair a relationship that has experienced a rift because of offense. It says, a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle. You ever get that feeling from people? I mean, that's a good description. I mean, because that's the way some people are. Once they've been offended at something, I mean, it's hard to even break through. And so it is so important in our dealings, in our relationships with people, whether family or otherwise, of seeking to not offend. Now, I'm not one of these that is looking to just, well, you got to tiptoe around and not offend because everybody's so easily offended. There are a lot of people who are very easily offended, and I'm mindful of that. And so I don't purposely try to offend people. But there are times when if you're doing what you know is right and you're saying what you know is right and in the way that it's right, if they're offended, you can't do much about that. But there are things we can at least have some awareness to not needlessly offend people. I'm not a proponent of needlessly offending people. We need to have awareness as to what we say, what we do in our spirit to try to avoid offense. And I will say, if you show kindness and compassion and love to people, even if you say something that you shouldn't have said and you regret later, they're more likely to not be offended if you've done things to build a good relationship. Verse 20, a man's belly shall be satisfied with the fruit of his mouth, and with the increase of his lips shall he be filled. Now I'll just read the commentary from Matthew Henry on this. He says, our comfort depends very much upon the testimony of our own consciences for us or against us. The belly is here put for the conscience, as Proverbs 20, verse 27. Now it is of great consequence to us whether that be satisfied and what that is filled with, for accordingly will our satisfaction be in our inward peace. The testimony of our consciences will be for us or against us, according as we have or have not governed our tongues well, according as the fruit of the mouth is good or bad, unto iniquity or unto righteousness, so the character of the man is, and consequently the testimony of his conscience concerning him. And so we see the connection with the lips, the mouth, and then the inward parts of the conscience. And in verse 21, the death and life are in the power of the tongue. And if I could choose another key verse for tonight, there's a few key verses. This would be another one of them. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. It shows the power of words. Now we could take this, you could apply that to the decisions of a judge. A judge has decisions over life and death in people's lives and the outcome of people's lives. But also, your tongue is so powerful. James 3:8 says, but the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. And so if we're not careful, our tongues can do great damage. It can cause death in people's lives. Now, you're not going to physically kill someone with your tongue. I don't think you have a tongue that's that powerful. But as far as in the spirit and what it does to a person, it is a powerful, powerful thing. Now, one example of the tongue, or in this case, that was through text messages, but it was still coming out of a person, a communication, was I believe it was a situation over in eastern part of the state a few years ago that some of you may remember hearing in the news about this young man who committed suicide, and he had the encouragement of his so-called friend, this girl, who texted him telling him to follow through with it. And he had some sort of mental, he was a disturbed person and had some problems, and it sounded like he didn't really want to go through with it, but she really pushed him to do it, and he ended up doing it. And I think this went to trial. She was being charged as part of that, and I don't remember if she got off or not. I have this recollection hearing that she actually got off, but I could be wrong about that. But just regardless of in the judicial system whether she's guilty or innocent, just think about the power of her words. The fact that she had the power over death and life over this vulnerable person, this person who definitely needed some help. And she encouraged him to go through with it, and resulted in, definitely had a connection of some sort with his death, in at least the influence. And you may not be in a situation where you would do that, but your tongue can also cause the death of relationships. It can cause the death of someone's joy and happiness based on using it in the wrong way. But then it also says life is in the power of the tongue, and so your words can be life-giving. They can be nourishing. They can be refreshing. They can be helpful to other people. And notice at the end of the verse, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Love what? Those that love to speak. They will face the consequences of their speech for good or bad. I mean, all right, you might like to talk, but be careful what you say, because you're going to eat the fruit of it. You're going to have to deal with the fruit of that speech. Keep your finger there. Turn to Matthew chapter 12. Matthew chapter 12. Matthew chapter 12. And verse 33. Matthew 12 and verse 33. Matthew 12 and verse 33, either make the tree good and his fruit good, or else make the tree corrupt and his fruit corrupt, for the tree is known by his fruit. O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. A good man out of the good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. Jesus is showing the importance of the mouth, speaking the importance of what comes out, because what comes out of the mouth is a reflection of what's in your heart. It's important what our heart can. It's important to examine what our heart condition is like, and if we find a certain spirit, certain words, maybe there's angry words being spoken on just all the times. There's times where people are, husbands, wives, fathers, mothers, that there's just anger in the home, and there's angry words being spoken, and it's a regular occurrence, and that shows there's something in that person's heart. It's not just the words they're speaking; there's something in the heart, and that can bring death or life, depending on whether it's angry speech or gracious and encouraging speech. But to eat the fruit, there are consequences to it. Good or bad, death and life, there'll be the fruit. Verse 22, back in Proverbs 18, whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favor of the Lord. Marriage is a good and important thing, and when someone marries a godly person, that marriage is being set up to be blessed by God. Anyone who's married here today would say that you've gotten favor from the Lord. Any men who are married here say you've gotten favor from the Lord because of who you married. Did you find a good thing? Bob's scratching his head like he's okay. He's got his hand up. I don't know if you're scratching your head. You were disguising putting your hand up. No, he raised his hand. So we have agreement here. You found a good wife. You have a good thing, and you've obtained favor of the Lord. Now, I can raise my hand there as well. And so it's important that when marriage is done right, it's full of benefits. It is full of benefits. And that's why we need to be teaching our children, and I say ours, like not just my children, but our children in this day and age. Christians need to be teaching their children the importance of marriage, and also guiding them and helping them in the steps of of making sure they know what to look for in a spouse, because it's a life-altering decision for good or for bad. And so it's so important in that. Now my children, particularly my daughters, they're not going anywhere. They're going to stay with me forever and ever. And so they will never... Death and life are also in the power of the looks as well, not just the tongue. That's right. It was a joke. It was a joke. Okay. Maybe my other daughters have a different opinion. I don't know. But apparently not this one. But I will say it's important. It's an important thing. And we see that marriage today is taken very lightly by a lot of people. And, well, it doesn't matter who gets married. Love is love and all these things. Do you know where that started? It started with the initial breakdown of marriage, even between men and women. So we might be upset about saying, well, two men shouldn't marry each other or two women shouldn't marry each other. But, marriage was in pretty bad shape in a lot of homes even before that got to be popular. And so it's a matter of let's focus on the building of good, godly marriages, and then those who are not married yet, helping them, encouraging them, and being a good example to them in what is taught and what is displayed. And so, whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor of the Lord. I think one of the commentators on this verse said, basically, pair that with Proverbs 31 and the virtuous woman. It's kind of the assumption, if you find a wife, you find a good thing, that means you found a virtuous woman, you found a godly, a good woman. In verse 23, the poor useth entreaties, but the rich answereth roughly. Poverty has a humbling effect, but riches often turn people hard. And so the poor, you think of how desperate people get when they're poor, and a lot of people, when they get really poor, they aren't afraid to ask for help. You think about the people who panhandle and they want money, and so they're asking for help. The poor useth entreaties, like, please, can you help me? Can you give me something? But the rich answereth roughly. And that's a fact of life in a lot of cases now. A lot of the richest of the rich, riches can tend to turn people harder, and maybe there's a lack of compassion. But I'm thankful for those people who have a lot of money that don't. They do have compassion on the poor, but certainly riches can often do turn people hard, but poverty has a humbling effect. Verse 24, a man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. And so I just preached a few weeks ago on friendship, so I will not develop this verse too much, but a man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. So to have friends means you must be a friend. Are you a friend to others? Jesus was accused of being a friend of sinners. And the reason was that he spent some time with them. And Jesus didn't claim to be a friend of sinners, but he was a friend in the sense that he actually spent some time with them. He was around them. He was not a companion of sinners. So a friend means just being a companion and doing what they do. Jesus was certainly not a friend in that way, but he was with them. And that was one of the reasons why they accused him of being a friend of sinners, but also Pharisees accused Jesus of doing what they did as well. And that's why that's where that accusation came from. But to have friends, if you want to have friends, you must be a friend. A man that hath friends must show himself friendly. And there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. There are some friendships that surpass the relationship even between brothers, even between family members. Think of David and Jonathan. They were not related, not part of the same immediate family, but they had such a close bond of friendship, and it just surpassed the relationship between brothers. And even I believe it was David that testified that the love that he had with Jonathan was even exceeded love for women. And now some people have taken that verse and used it to push perverse things, but it's not a perverse verse. It's just simply showing the deep love that they had for each other. Right. And so that's the wonderful thing about friendship. And it's good to have friends, but there is some responsibility involved. Are you a friend to others? Are you a friend? And the greatest friends should be fellow believers. I mean, you can be friendly to people, you can be friendly to lost people. We shouldn't necessarily, our closest companions should not be lost people. The people we do things with, the people we confide in the most should not be lost people. They should be other believers. They should be other people in our family. But we need to be a friend. Be a friend. One of the things that, to be a friend, you just never know what effect you're going to have on somebody's life by being a friend. You just never know. Sometimes you do know. Sometimes you do see that. And it makes a difference. And even those that may not have much to offer in return as far as friendship, but just some people who need a supporting hand, some encouragement, some attention, can make a world of difference. And even when they don't have much to offer back. We're going to stop there at the end of the chapter of Proverbs chapter 18. Principles from Proverbs 18. And the whole purpose of this is messages like this is to help you in, I don't know exactly which verse is exactly what you need in a given message. I don't know which verse means the most to you, but you know which verses mean the most to you in a given message. You know the area where God touches on your life. That's something I really need to focus on in my life. I can use some practical help in this, and this is an area God's bringing to my attention that I really need some wisdom from the Word of God. And that's the point of the message. We've been going through Proverbs, principles from Proverbs, and it's kind of been off and on because we took a break last year and covered another book. But here we are, still in Proverbs. Because when you live by the principles in Proverbs, your life is on the right path. It's a path of wisdom, it's a path of knowledge, it's a path of understanding, and it brings glory to God, and it can really help not go to the end of life and just be full of regrets, but you've actually made some good decisions. You've actually had some character in your life. You've actually operated with some wisdom, discernment, and prudence.